Hi, this is Chris Hicks. It's currently Friday, August 25th, and in a few minutes I'm going to share with you some video that was taken at the Commissioners meeting on Wednesday, August 23rd. Before I do that though, I want to take you through a little background. I think all of you know I'm a very persistent guy. I believe that government should be accountable to the people. I believe that questions should be answered. I believe that the people should come first. I am totally against backroom deals. I'm totally in favor of transparency, open, clean government, etc., etc. So in my persistence around what was really the deal with this secret plan that Mr. Uible put together that involved FC Cincinnati and included as a part, a hotel tax, I want to share with you some of the things that I think that we have learned because of my persistence. And this is just a highlights list, but let me take you through some highlights. First, we learned that the CVB board got taken over by the commissioners on August 20th, 2012. That was particularly Commissioner Humphrey and Commissioner Uible, in which a mass change was made to the board to replace what were mostly industry people with government people. So today we have a CVB board that has 7 members. 6 of them are government people. One, the only one that isn't, is Chris Ham, who is, for lack of a better term, a crony of Uible, who is also head of the Port Authority Board and on the Library Board. Second thing we learned, the commissioners, per Commissioner Painter, discussed approving money for this deal directly out of Clermont County's budget or funds, if you will. That deal went nowhere, as Commissioner Painter was clearly going to be a no vote, and that's what seems to have launched the secret Uible plan to use the CVB and Port Authority to do secretly what would have been done in a public commissioners meeting. Third thing I put on this list that we learned that Mr. Uible has been in direct contact with Mr. Nick Rubel, the owner of the Red Barn site, and he was lobbying Doug Green with an email as late as June 19th, 2017, as the budget stuff was happening in the Capitol. Why is this so important that we learn this? Because Mr. Uible maintained both to the press and to the public that he was not involved in this. Well, he was sending an email on as late as June 19th to Representative Green in support of what was happening with the budget and the hotel tax. What else did we learn because of my persistence? Number 4, we learned that Mr. Uible threatened to get a hotelier fired, both verbally and in writing, if his tax plan did not go through. Fifth, we learned that Mrs. Fraley, the auditor, serves on the CVB board that receives almost $700,000 a year from her office, that she participates in spending. And I put on here item 6 that we learned is there is also a special executive committee of that CVB board that can spend money without overall board approval from the CVB. And that committee consists of Auditor Fraley, Deputy Auditor Tilbury, Commissioner Uible, and Chris Ham. So we've learned that also because of my persistence. What else have we learned? There's another nonprofit. There's another nonprofit that is controlled by Uible and Fraley. That nonprofit is called the Claremont Sports Development Corporation. I just found out about this. I'm going to try to get more information on this and how it's structured and what goes on through it. Number 8 of this highlight list of things we learned is that Mr. Uible went on a 2016 trip with Jeff Birding to Atlanta around the Atlanta United facility. He did not disclose this trip to the public, to other commissioners, and he did not disclose it on his 2016 ethics form. And the 9th thing I put on this list that we learned as a highlight is that Mr. Uible lies. He lies. He lied about no one asking for a meeting that he had offered. He lied about that he only got positive feedback on his plan. He lied about having gotten hotelier approval 6 to 8 months before the budget process was working out. And finally, he lied about not being involved, as we have seen by me just highlighting that he was sending emails and in communication with people. So those are just some of the things that we learned because of my persistence. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to get to the video that I talked about, but I want to go through just a real quick timeline, just a few of the highlights. I know some of you have seen my longer timelines, but just a few of the highlights. It was on June 9th, 2017, June 9th, 2017, 77 days ago, that Mr. Uible put in writing to me a threat to get a general manager of a hotel fired if this tax plan didn't go through. And it said, I will likely report him to his management if the 1% doesn't go through, and he will be fired. That's slimy. That's slimy. That was a big concern for me immediately, is why do we have a commissioner who is making threats to a private employee based on a political thing that the commissioner is trying to achieve. That was 77 days ago. 75 days ago, on June 11th, is when Mr. Uible sent a note offering a meeting to a specific email list, and it said, P.S. I should have added that if any of you copied on this email would like to sit down and discuss this further, I'm available. I'm not employed by the CVB, but I have an understanding of the situation at hand. That was 75 days ago. He has still not had any of those meetings that were requested. That's super slimy, and I'm going to keep pressing until he honors his own words to have a meeting, now 75 days old today. Now let's keep going forward to 58 days ago. On June 28th, this is when there was a commissioner meeting. I think it's the first commissioner meeting I ever went to. And this is the one where I spoke in the video, I swear was on YouTube and got deleted. It still shows as being deleted on YouTube. And they issued a press release actually about losing the video 58 days ago. And I like to highlight this one because Mr. Uible's quoted in that press release. Commissioners place the highest premium on transparency, said Board President David Uible. Well, I guess that doesn't apply when it comes to secret trips you've been on that you haven't disclosed to your fellow commissioners, you haven't disclosed to the public, and you haven't put on your ethics form. Slimy. And it was after this that I started filming things because I was worried about would the record be preserved or would it be destroyed. Now, 9 days ago, August 16th, this is when we had the revelation of the secret trip taken by Mr. Uible with Jeff Birding and with some others. We now know for sure Uible was on the trip, but he told the press, remember, he wasn't involved. He wasn't involved with the whole lobbying activity. He wasn't involved with this scheme. It was not included in his ethics filing. You're going to see in the video, he still won't say who paid for the trip. He still won't say who paid for this trip. I think it was kept secret from the other commissioners. I'm not sure about Ed Humphrey, though. As I've said before, Bob Proud told me that he did find out about the trip, but it was only after the trip had taken place. And don't forget that there is behind this, that CVB board and executive committee and CVB minutes. Maybe the CVB paid for this, but maybe it wasn't something recorded in their regular minutes. Maybe it was done by a group secretly. Who knows? Nobody will talk on this. It's all slimy stuff, backroom deals, kind of stuff that I hate. All right, we're going to get into the videos. We're getting very close here. I just put this important question up. Where would we be if Mr. Uible honored his own offer to meet made 77 days ago today? Let's just stop and think about that for a second. Where would we be if Mr. Uible honored his own offer to meet made 77 days ago? We'd be in a whole different place. A whole different place. This is on Mr. Uible. This is on Mr. Uible for making offers that he won't keep and being disingenuous and not coming clean on what he's been involved with. All right. So in the video you're about to see, I'm going to ask a question over and over again in that video, and I want you to understand why I'm asking the question and what the relevance of the question is. So the plot that Mr. Uible put together involves different elements. One element is the CVB, another element is the Port Authority, a third element is the hotel tax. So here's the way this was going to roll. There's going to be a hotel tax. The money goes to the CVB. The CVB would somehow, I think, as best as I can understand, remember this is all secret right now, so I'm still trying to put all the pieces together. So I hope I got it right so far. The CVB, somehow that money was going to get used for the Port Authority to issue debt, at least $3.7 million, because that's what I was told by somebody on the CVB was the amount that was going to be paid for the land. That debt that's going to be on us, the taxpayers, would be used to facilitate the FC Cincinnati deal. All being kept secret, the contract with FC Cincinnati secret because it would be part of the CVB, all out of the public eye. So that's how the plot kind of formed. The other commissioners, I think, kept in the dark on this. And other than maybe Humphrey knew about it, and they participated in the CVB board takeover that enabled this, particularly Mr. Humphrey and Mr. Uible. And the township people, the township elected officials, and John Becker, the state rep, they were meant to be kept in the dark on this whole deal and not know what was going on. So remember, doing in darkness what couldn't get done in the light. I think because Mr. Painter had said he was going to be a no vote if it came before the commissioners themselves. So that's the plot. So let's get to what's going to happen in the video. So The Port Authority is a board within the Clermont County government that can issue debt. It had a meeting on February 15th, 2017. In the minutes of that meeting, it says that Mr. Uible was there, but almost right when the meeting starts, it says he stepped out of the room. It never says he came back, and they had a closed-door session. I have been told on it from a very reliable source who was in the room that during that closed-door session, Mr. Uible laid out the whole scheme. The tax, the debt, even that they were going to keep in the dark townships that would have infrastructure spending responsibilities or requirements to be able to facilitate if something actually got built at the Red Barn site. So I've been told from a very credible authority that was in the meeting that closed door session, this got laid out. Now keep in mind that Mr. Uible, I'll say that he is a de facto member of the Port Authority Board. According to the compatibility of office on the Ohio Attorney General's site, a commissioner cannot be part of a Port Authority Board. So not only is he here acting as a de facto member, if my source is telling the truth and accurate, he's actually leading a closed door meeting portion of their session with their actual board members. So that was on February 15th. I have tried to get answers as to was he actually in that meeting or not because of that inconsistency in the minutes. I have asked the members of the CVB board. I have asked the secretary, who is a woman named Jennifer Fisher, who works at Park National Bank. Was he or was he not in that meeting? And I can't get any answers. And if I ask answers for questions like that to Uible, yes or no, were you in this meeting? Instead of getting an answer, if I email it, I'm going to get a long legalese thing from Ernie Ramos and team telling me that I can't compel a commissioner to create a public record, and if he were to reply to my email, that his reply would be a public record, and therefore he can't answer a yes or no question. So I, being persistent, think, okay, if that's the case, what I'm going to do is I'll, at breaks, not during the meeting, never disrupting the meeting. You can go watch the whole commissioners meeting other than seeing me sitting there. You won't see me say anything. Only at breaks in the meeting, I'm going to ask him that question. Were you in the closed door portion of the February 15th, 2017 Port Authority Board meeting? You're going to find that I ask it several times in the video. There's actually 3 times. And now we're going to go and I'm going to show you the first time and then I'll come back. The first time that I ask is in the commissioners meeting when they are breaking for executive session. What happens in a commissioners meeting is they do their business, then they'll break for if they're going to have an executive session. When they break for an executive session, I don't know why, but a lot of times they don't leave the room for a while. So in this case, you're going to see in the video, Mr. Uible mills about the room for a while, and there's a point in time when I ask him the question, were you in the closed door portion of the 2015-17 Port Authority Board meeting? And that's time 1 that I ask the question. Hopefully you enjoy the video.
Okay, we have need then for executive session pursuant to 121.22, G2 and G3 of our revised code.
I was afraid to do it.
And I went a little paranoid after I tried not to.
I'm working on it, you're right.
Absolutely awesome.
But you just take it
good.
and pass it
Well, that is
out.
the welder's helmet.
Mr. Uible, while you have a second, were you in the February 15th, 2017 closed door portion of the Port Authority Board meeting?
It was they,
Were you in that meeting or not, in the closed door portion?
From where before she put the helmet on?
Yeah.
Because he said that.
Okay, so that was the first time I asked, when they had broken for executive session and Mr. Uible was milling about the room. Now you're going to see the second time, and this is the time that is probably the most uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me. So what happened was when they were in executive session, I noticed that Mr. Uible was out in the hallway. I don't know why. He wasn't actually in the executive session, but he was out in the hallway. So I went out into the hallway and I actually asked the question again in the hallway. He's talking to the deputy sheriff. You're going to see the way he responds. When he responds, he literally gets like this far away from me. Okay, he almost hit my nose. I got a big nose. I could tell his breath very clearly from it, and he just goes off on me in terms of, do I need help? He can get me help, you know, making insinuations. But notice that he does not answer the question, yes or no. Were you in the closed door portion of the February 15th, 2017 Port Authority Board meeting? So it's a little uncomfortable, and I feel like I'm a junior 60 Minutes reporter from the 70s when 60 Minutes used to be more competent in what they did. But take a look at this video, the second time that I asked Mr. Uible about him being in that meeting.
To Fort Lewis for 2 years, back to the 9th Infantry Regiment, and then went to Ohio
3 years now.
Hey, while you're here, Mr. Uible,
I'm talking
can you
to
answer the
you.
question whether you were in the February 15th Port Authority closed door
Chris,
part of the meeting?
I think you've been harassing me to the point where
No.
I don't want to have to get a restraining order
I
against
don't
you.
think I'm harassing you at all. I asked you a
Do
question.
you need help? I need to
don't.
ask people, because if you need help, we can find
kind of help?
I don't know, sir, but we can get help if that's the case, because you
Okay,
seem not to get it.
Why don't we
You continue to
address,
hassle me to the point where we have to have deputy sheriffs here because you don't leave it alone.
why don't you address, can you answer the question,
So-
were you in the Port Authority closed door portion of the meeting on February 15th? Can you answer that question? Okay, so now the third time. Let me do a little setup for this. The way the commissioners meeting works is after they've done their business, then they do their executive session, then they come back and finish up. That's when they normally would have public participation. And then they finish up and they do their minutes right then. So there's a time when they go into recess and they're waiting for the clerk to bring them the final copy of the minutes, and they approve the minutes right then at the end of the meeting. But when they're in recess, they just sit there. So they're just sitting there and people might be yucking it up or talking about different things. They're not having their meeting. So even if it looks like when you see this, they're having their meeting, they're in recess at this time. And so I sit there and I ask the question again. This is also the time that I ask the question, who paid for the Atlanta trip? And one person answers that question, and you're going to see that in this. His name's David. I'm going to leave you in pins and needles to know which David it was that answered that question.
So we'll take a recess then as the minutes are prepared.
Mr. Uible, can I ask you again to answer the question? Were you in
No,
the
thank you, sir.
February 15th, 2017 Port Authority Board meeting closed session? Will you just answer that question, yes or
You can
no?
look at the website. Everything you're asking me is already out there for public.
I've had an
knowledge.
informant
It's
that
all
was in the meeting
transparent.
tell me that something's not
Everything is
recorded
available.
properly in the minutes.
And you're asking me information.
So the
just
answer
to
is
try to
no?
get me on camera.
So the answer is
I
no.
don't know. It's on the website. I've been-
You don't know if you were in the closed door meeting of the part of the meeting of the
Would you
Port
just
Authority on
quiet
February
down?
15th.
Yeah.
Quiet down, you're interrupting. We're
Mr. Hicks, I'm trying to sign
paused here.
documents.
You're in recess.
Yes, sir.
It's a simple yes or no question.
You're harassing.
It's not harassing, it's a citizen asking for an answer to a question. Could have been answered long ago, Mr. Humphrey.
You see it your way, I'll see it mine. I see it.
It's a
as
yes or no,
harassing.
it's one word, yes or no. Were you in the closed door
Mr.
session?
Hicks, could you please just calm down?
I'm very calm. You seem very agitated.
You're continuing to harass all three commissioners.
I'm not harassing anybody. I'm
You were in
asking
my
a yes
face
or no
earlier. I was
question.
having a conversation with another county employee, and you're harassing me. I keep saying that.
Okay, then
If you want to
take
continue
action
to
on that, but
harass
can you
me,
answer my
we'll have to
question, yes
take
or
this
no?
measure up a notch, and,
Okay.
okay? So just
Do
just
that
calm
then,
down.
but can you answer my question?
No one's going to answer your questions in there, so
Okay?
you can leave now if you'd like, or whatever.
No, stay here.
Okay.
Can anybody answer the question, who paid for the trip to Atlanta?
I can't.
I appreciate that, Mr. Rayner. Can anybody else answer who paid for the trip to Atlanta? Okay, so now you've seen the videos, and I wanted to come back at the end here and just talk about what do I think could happen next. Well, I want to start by talking about what has happened as the plot has been exposed. And I want to highlight three things. Lots of things have happened, but one thing related to Mr. Uible is he tried to come after me with the Republican Party. If you're on the executive committee, you know that. He tried to have an emergency executive committee meeting to deal with insincere and nefarious Chris Hicks. So that fizzled out, but he tried to use the party against me. Second thing on here is he tried to demonize me with the sheriff. He had sent communication to the sheriff that I had been harassing him on his cell phone, and he had to block my number. I just found out about that from a records request, so I saw the emails. I immediately dumped all my phone records and provided them to the sheriff. Total absurdity, total nonsense that I was doing anything remotely close to that with Mr. Uible and his cell phone. And the third thing on here I put is he used government to try to shut me down. If you remember back to July 26th, he wouldn't let me speak at the meeting. He tried to deputy remove me from the room. So he's trying to use his government position to shut me down. So what's next? What's next? Well, I think that Mr. Uible is scared to death of having to take questions straight on. I think he's got a web across the commissioners, the CVB, the Port Authority, the head of the Republican Party. He's got kind of this web, and I think it's catching up with him. And so when he gets asked questions, he's in a difficult place where he might have told people different answers at different times. And so we have an impending Clermont County Republican Central Committee meeting coming up towards the end of September. And what's interesting to me is I think Mr. Uible would probably do almost anything in his power to avoid having to take questions in that meeting, avoid having this be a prominent discussion. And I don't know what that portends, but notice that in the videos they seem to have been training on the use of the word harassment, because now if I come to a public building at a public meeting at a public time and ask a question, it's harassment apparently. That makes me think like, well, maybe he'll try to go down a path of now trying to use the legal system to act against me. We'll see what happens. It's his prerogative. But in him trying to avoid answering questions, it'll be very interesting to see if he goes down that road. It might be interesting because then he might be getting questions from a judge, not just from a citizen. And maybe at that point in time we can get some honest, clear, concise answers to questions, especially ones that where the answer should be yes or no.